Monster Hunter Generations for the 3DS. This is the 17th Monster Hunter game for the 3DS system. I'm just making this number up entirely.
That sounds all right. Yeah. But not that many come out in the US. Like we've had a very limited number because generally they've played it very smart, that they have seen that it's not as popular. So like in Japan, you'll have Monster Hunter, then Monster Hunter Ultra, and then Monster Hunter Super Ultra, like kind of like Capcom does with Street Fighter games. But for like Monster Hunter 4, the only one we got was Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate, and that was the best version of it, the one with the hardest monsters. In Japan, they had Monster Hunter 4 and then 4 Ultimate. And Generations is not a full Monster Hunter game in some ways. Like this is definitely not Monster Hunter 5. It builds a lot of Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate, both in the way that it plays, in the battles that you go through, and in the things that it introduced to the game.
Let's get a little overview of the Monster Hunter series. You know, we've already talked about how it's very popular in Japan. I mean, this series could exist entirely in Japan and still be massively successful, but they bring it across the ocean every couple years. But Peter, Monster Hunter in your world, you haven't hunted, monsters quite as diligently as Justin Haywold. I'm not sure any of us have.
Yeah, no, not really at all.
But but in terms of the sort of the niche that you see this game fitting, in terms of it begs comparisons to Dark Souls and stuff. What's Monster Hunter all about?
From my perspective, Monster Hunter is a very hardcore game, one that is unapologetically difficult and difficult to penetrate as well. Like to really understand not just what to do, but how to do it in a way that is efficient but fun. And that's always been my problem with these games. Is I see a lot of promise and I always want to get into it. And about half hour in, I'm like questioning everything, and there's not really a good answer for it. But that doesn't necessarily make these games bad. I mean, they're clearly beloved. You love these games. They always get great scores because there is a tried and true system within them that works really well. I just wish that they could find a way to broaden their horizons, and it sounds like they haven't managed to do that yet.
It is not a pick up and play experience. If you just want to jump into a game, it is not like that Zelda level of, I know exactly what I'm doing. All of the items that you get are like represented by icons, and it's really just getting familiarity with things. When you've played the game for many iterations, like that, because that is a shorthand for what the things that you need. But even those just really aren't organized that well. It's a very old school way of organizing. I think the bigger problem that it has is that it is terrible at tutorializing how to play it. When you get into the game, it's weird that even when they're explaining how to play something, they do it with a lot of text. Like, you're going to read this. And then at some point they'll say, well, I'm not going to explain everything. There's an in-game menu. Just go through that and read the rest of it. Oh, man. But there are ways to learn it. And even what I've done, when I want to learn something new about it, I go to YouTube. There are so many people who've spent hundreds and hundreds of hours playing these games, and they have great resources. It's still a lot to go through. Like there's, I think, Gaijin Hunter, I would throw out a little bit of a plug to. He does like 25 minute videos on each individual weapon and how to start out on them. And they are amazing tutorials that once you go through them, it makes the game more fun. You're like, I understand how this works and how to use it in what kind of situations. But the problem is that you have to do that outside of the game to get that enjoyment.
And at what point, I mean, you have to get to a point of familiarity with the game where that tutorial even makes sense, right?
The tutorials, especially since Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate, I think they've done a good job of getting you into the basics. It's not always the most fun, but understanding how the world is laid out, what you need to do on a hunt. But the difficulty can ramp up very quickly. And kind of like Peter was saying, like there is that Dark Souls element where when you go up against a boss, he doesn't have a glowing red spot. It's not The Legend of Zelda, and it says, you need to hit me here. I'm going to be invulnerable all of the other times until I show that and then hit me. No, he's just it's just like a big monster, and you need to figure it out like by watching him and observing and running around. When is a good time to hit him? Where's a good place to hit him? How am I going to survive this encounter?
Or like me, you try very hard to figure it out for yourself, and then you just end up dying and saying, well, I've got better games to play with.
Well, had a good run.
Yeah, but I really want to know, I mean, I know a little bit because I've read your review, but what is it about this series that does make it so good, that does make it have such lasting appeal?
I think it is multiple things. Part of it is the social aspect. And that's the thing I think that's always made it catch on better in Japan, is that you have a more tight-knit group. When you're going to be playing on the train, there's a chance, like with Pokemon Go, that you're going to run into someone else who's playing that game, and you can actually just get together and go on a hunt.
It has that install base. It has that broad appeal and that you are able to encounter people casually.
And we just don't have that here.
Yeah. But co-op multiplayer is a huge part of that series, and especially on the 3DS.
And it's so much fun to play with somebody else, to work together towards a common goal. But the other thing that it has that's also very MMO-like is that aspect of collecting. When you fight a monster, it's going to drop some rare piece of loot, and you have to collect a whole bunch of them, and sometimes it'll be something that'll let you put together a really cool-looking piece of armor. I mean, Eric Tay, back in the back running the cameras for this, he knows about that pull of collecting armor for Destiny, for World of Warcraft, and Monster Hunter, even though it's on a smaller system, gets you in that same way. You're like, oh, if I spend a little bit more time, I can get this really cool helmet. My character will be super powerful.
That's what I wanted to ask though. Like, do you feel like this series is like languishing because it's on the 3DS? Because it's not like a PlayStation 4 game. It's not, this or even a PC game for that matter.
I feel like PC would be a really great home for the Monster Hunter series, but at the same time, it doesn't have that same appeal. Like, if there were Monster Hunter 5, you always have that, I think, feeling that once a series gets along to a certain number, maybe then it's unapproachable, because I haven't played Monster Hunter 1 through 4. Like, would that hurt it more to, like, maybe a complete rebranding? Kind of like what Dark Souls did, Bloodborne.
Yeah.
Like, it makes those feel like they are standalone experiences. I mean, they just don't feel like that. You don't feel like, oh, I have to have played the other games to really get into that.
Maybe like Monster Hunter NX or something could be a good turning point.
NX is an untried. We'll have to see.
Oh, I know. But I want you to speculate. Like, imagine, with all the things we're talking about, the potential for a mobile, component of this, to then be able to bring it home and get like a better version of the game potentially, depending on whatever the hell the NX is.
Yeah, something that does tie into kind of like how Pokemon Go ties into your real world experiences. Like, I think anytime you get an app that will tie into playing the actual game, that's always fun and a little bit exciting for me, because it feels like, oh, I'm getting something out of this. Like, imagine if the next Pokemon game uses some element of Pokemon Go. You're able to bring in items or bring in Pokemon or somehow interact with your game. Monster Hunter, if it was able to do something like that, I feel like that would help lower that barrier to entry. Like, you have a free-to-play version of this that gives you something. Well, if I go and try out the real game, I can bring that over and it'll help me out a little bit.
But as it stands, the barrier to entry for Monster Hunter Generations still pretty high.
Yeah, you probably want to put in like 10. You don't want to give up after the first 20 hours, is all I'm saying. You put in that first 20. After that, it's really smooth sailing.
Oh, it's a big ask. But like you said, there are resources out there to help. And, we are lucky enough that if you're watching this show, you have access to those resources because internet. But in terms of Generations, let's say someone got a kick out of Ultimate or, gave Ultimate a try. I mean, is this for people who are like, yep, liked Ultimate, want more Monster Hunter? That seems like it's pretty squarely in that target zone.
Yeah, it's something that is going after that established fan base. If you played 4 Ultimate, this is a natural thing to get a little bit more of that Monster Hunter hook. If you haven't played 4 Ultimate, I would probably recommend that one a little bit more over this one. They're both excellent because they're both at the core about hunting monsters. 4 Ultimate has a more interesting story built around it, whereas Generations kind of ignores the story and just goes straight for killing big monsters.
Are there any people in the Monster Hunter world that are like, remember that story about Journey? There was this group of people, I think they were like senior citizens or something, who would just go and into Journey and guide new players through. Like, that was their thing. They would just wanted to play with new players and like experience it with them and be like, guides. Is there like a crew of Monster Hunter people that'll do that same thing? No, like, all right, like, let's go hunt them monsters, noobs. Yeah, I'll be your guide.
Like most MMOs, I think it has a very strong community of people who just want to help the fan base grow and to help you get into the game. But at the same time, when you're playing the game, you don't have voice chat. So that's makes a little bit of a barrier between that.
Yeah, so maybe the handheld is a little bit of a reining it in too much.
All right, well, if you want a challenge and you want to get into one of the most popular games in Japan on one of the more longer-running series, Monster Hunter Generations is out now on the 3DS, garnered an 8 on GameSpot. Go read Justin Haywald's review, see if it's for you.